Hello, welcome to the Struggle Bus. My name is Nolafis, and today it's all about checkpoints. It seems like a simple topic, but there are some aspects that aren't so obvious. But before we get started about those, let's start with the basics. I mean, if you've played a Trackmania map, you know what checkpoints are. They're typically blue markers that record your time as you cross them, and you need to go through them all in order to finish a map. In addition to forcing the player to drive the route instead of heading straight to the finish, checkpoints also serve as a place to respawn your car. So if you do end up crashing, look, I know you would never actually crash, but let's pretend for a moment. So if a crash does occur, you can respawn at the last checkpoint and try again. In TM 2020, the flying respawn was added, so you even keep your speed, which is nice. Speaking of respawns, there are currently 3 different types. The first, I've already explained, that being the flying respawn. The second is a standing respawn, and that's done by pressing the respawn key twice. Instead of keeping your speed, you'll start from 0. It seems much worse than the flying respawn, but necessary if you manage to crash right after collecting a checkpoint. And the last type of respawn is the custom respawn, once again triggered by double tapping the respawn key, except the mapper can edit the checkpoint and move the double respawn to somewhere else. This is typically used in faster maps where the car needs a lot of speed. Builders place the turbo blocks off to the side and move the double respawn on top of those. That way, only the players who need the boost get it. If you're wondering how to do this, I'll cover that later in this video. Unfortunately, it is something that only PC mappers can do. There are a few tricks I'm going to cover that console players don't have access to right now, and I know it sucks, but that's the name of the game until Nadeo updates the console editor. Whenever I mention one of those PC-only mechanics, I'll let you know. And those are the absolute basics of checkpoints. You need to pick them all up before you can finish a map. If you need to try an element again, you can retry from the last checkpoint instead of starting all over. And most importantly, they're blue. In the base vanilla blocks, there isn't just one checkpoint. There are 3. The regular checkpoint is an arch with these stupid arms on the side that I always crash into. Ring checkpoints are, well, they're rings, and gate checkpoints are kind of similar to regular checkpoints, only they're flat across and come in a few variations. Everything I've said before about the different kinds of respawns apply to the regular checkpoints, but not the other 2. With gate checkpoints, you have both the flying and standing respawns, but you can't edit a custom respawn. Since it's an item, you can't take it into the mesh modeler, but more on that later. The ring checkpoint, on the other hand, only has one type of respawn, and that's the flying respawn. If you try to double respawn, you won't start at the ring, but rather at the last available double respawn. So that could be a standing one at the previous gate or regular checkpoint, or all the way back at the start block. Every once in a while, I'll come across a newer mapper who only uses the ring checkpoints because they're easier to place, and they don't realize that a standing respawn and starting a brand new run are the exact same thing. At this point, it may seem like the regular checkpoint is superior in every single way, and don't get me wrong, it is, but the other 2 do have legitimate use cases. If you're just using the vanilla blocks, the regular checkpoints are the most restricted. They're always built into a block, and those stupid little arms do get in the way. Especially if you're building a wider platform section, the gate checkpoints are very good for this purpose. Since there's a lot less material touching the ground, they're very easy to fit into a route. Not to mention their items, which are a bit easier to place in weird positions than full blocks. Ring checkpoints are probably the least used in the entire game, but they do have their purpose. In past games, rings were often placed on jumps to help the player line up before they take off, as well as guarantee no funny shenanigans in terms of cuts. You can still do that in TM 2020, but one of the big draws is Cup of the Day or several player-ran tournaments with live rounds. If you take a jump, collect a ring checkpoint, and you're slightly off where you should be, you can't adjust your trajectory in the air, so the only thing you can do is double respawn. In live rounds, this is super punishing and can ruin a player's experience with the entire competition. However, if getting track of the day or into a competition isn't your goal, this is still a viable method of keeping the player on track, as long as solo hunters are your intended audience, as if a player misaligns a jump, they'll probably respawn from the start and try again anyway. If you really want to use a ring checkpoint in this way, I'd recommend using it for smaller dropdowns rather than large jumps. The biggest drawback from using a ring checkpoint is that lack of a double respawn, but that can also be a feature. Maps have popped up where there's a single regular checkpoint and several branching paths with a ring at the end. The player is supposed to drive through one of the options, pick up the ring checkpoint, double respawn to the regular checkpoint, and drive down a different path. Rinse and repeat until all of the rings have been collected, and now the player can finish. It's a pretty cool style, but difficult to grind since if you double respawn too early, you miss the ring checkpoint. Obviously, with some imagination, there are plenty more uses the alternative checkpoints have that the regular one just doesn't. And I'm sure if you think about it for a bit, you can come up with something pretty cool. But before I move on to the next section, I want to go over one more feature. Unfortunately, this is PC only, but linked checkpoints are a thing and very useful. Basically, you can group checkpoints together, and if one of them are taken, it counts as all of them being taken. Gate checkpoints specifically are really good for this, as if you have a wide platform, the gates snap together, where you can link them, and now you essentially have one giant checkpoint. That's not the only use though, as this also allows players to build a map with multiple paths, where each route can still finish without having to go back to all the other options. And just like before, players have come up with some pretty creative ways to put linked checkpoints to work. So see what you can come up with. Hey, Editing Nullifus here. So while editing, I realized that I explained what linked checkpoints were, but not really how to do them, so I'm gonna do that real quick. It's really easy. At the bottom of the screen, well, I made this little map here to kind of show I've got the different checkpoints here, and I'm going to make two different groups. So at the bottom with this box with the gear, you have edit block properties. I'm going to go ahead and click that, and I'm going to click one checkpoint. And this kind of chain link right here, I'm going to click that. And that's going to change from a checkpoint to a link checkpoint and group one. So I'm going to hit OK for now. We can see link checkpoint number one. And I'm going to click this one, the ring checkpoint now. And I'm going to do the same thing, link checkpoint group one. So now these two checkpoints are linked to each other. And the only reason I have a regular and a ring checkpoint here is I wanted to show that you could do this with any type. They don't have to be the same type of checkpoint, as long as they're checkpoints. But here, I also want these to be linked, but I only want these two gate checkpoints to be linked with each other, not with these two. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing, click it, click that link checkpoint, but I'm going to change the group to 2. Now you see link checkpoint number 2. I'm going to do the same thing here. And perfect. So now basically it groups them together. All the number 2 checkpoints are linked together. All the number 1 checkpoints are linked together, and you can do this for basically any number. And if we go ahead and drive this real quick, it does not matter which side of the road we take. We collect that, and we have a finish time. And we can go on the left. Collect that, finish time. Perfect. Okay. I've talked about all of the checkpoints available in the game and how to link them together, but if you're on PC, that's not all of the options you have. I'm so sorry, console builders. Just like how you can make your own custom blocks, you can make your own checkpoints. Don't ask me how, I have absolutely no idea, but I do know how to take other people's hard work, and that's on the item exchange. There is a very specific use for custom checkpoints that I'll cover a bit later. But I did want to mention that they're here and go over a couple of my favorites. There are a few different sets featuring these line checkpoints, and I'll link custom waypoints, which also includes the start and finish lines, CP's stripes extension, and stripes for everyone in the description down below, as these are extremely versatile, and I think you'll be hard pressed to find a spot these won't cover. If you don't like the look of these, it's also common to place these stripe checkpoints just below the surface so you can't see them. If you do end up doing this, it's common courtesy to place some sort of blue marker on either side of the track, so players can still intuitively know that a checkpoint is still there. We'll revisit this topic in a moment, but for now, it's time to go over when and where checkpoints should be placed. In previous Trackmania titles, checkpoints were pretty much just there for cut prevention. Every respawn was a standing respawn, and the mapper would have to go out of their way to put in a secondary route with some boosters to get the player back up to speed. Now, with the flying respawn, checkpoints have some added responsibilities. They still prevent cuts, but builders now have to think about the entries and exits of each checkpoint. Putting a checkpoint in the middle of an element is generally frowned upon, as if a player messes up, instead of being able to go back before the trick, they're now stuck in the middle and can't practice the part they just messed up. Now, I'm going to bring the gate checkpoints back up for a moment. There are two very common mistakes with these, and I have to talk about them. The first one plagues Cup of the Day, and that's the standing respawn. Since the gate checkpoints are items, they can be placed pretty much wherever, and they don't come with their own surface to respawn on, so the double respawn is a set position that can't be changed. Meaning, if the checkpoint is above the surface, the car will fall onto it, or the big issue I want to talk about, if the gate is a smidge too low, the car will clip into the block and fall under it, rendering the double respawn completely worthless. With Cup of the Day, thousands of players will drive your map over and over again. With a sample size this large, every checkpoint will have players relying on that double respawn for one reason or another. If they crash an earlier element and end up on their roof, but still slide through the checkpoint, that player has to double respawn to continue, and if that's broken, they're forced to give up. If you are using these gate checkpoints, please check your double respawns. Even if you tested it before, sometimes you absentmindedly delete a gate to adjust the placement a tiny amount. So before you say a map is complete, drive the route and standing respawn from every checkpoint just to make sure. The second mistake I keep seeing is this one. Basically, a gate checkpoint right at the transition between a platform and road. Initially, it makes sense to place one here, as this is often right between two elements. But you see these little triangle pieces starting the road border? Yeah, they look innocent, but they've committed mass murder. It's very easy to accidentally clip them and flip your car, and if the checkpoint is right there, there's no chance to try again in an attempt to keep your speed. You have to take a standing respawn, and when combined with the first issue with gate checkpoints, it's awful. Just don't place the checkpoint right there. If you can, put it a block or two down so players can react to a mistake. As for the regular checkpoints, the only thing I really want to bring up are the stupid little stubby arms, specifically on platforms. The car can go in between the arm and the checkpoint. This is called a triangle CP, and a lot of people intentionally build this. However, it's important to keep in mind because sometimes it does end up being faster on routes where the mapper didn't intend for it to be used. It can bump up the difficulty of the map quite a bit. And especially after a wide open platform, threading the needle can be pretty annoying to hunt depending on how it's set up. I'm not saying don't build this, I'm just warning you that this is a thing and don't get caught off guard by it. As far as more general checkpoint tips, if you're building for a more competitive environment, it's important to place enough of them. Typically, for a 45-second route, you want at least 6 or 7, and the player shouldn't go more than 10 seconds without collecting one. This helps prevent cuts, as well as prevents players falling too far behind from one mistake. It's also important to not put anything too jarring directly behind a checkpoint. This harkens back to placing a checkpoint right before a jump, but also applies to obstacles restricting the roadway. For instance, if there's a transition coming up that requires the player to be on the left side of the road, it's common to place poles or something on the right side to force the car on the correct line. Don't do this right after a checkpoint. Checkpoints block vision, and if the player accidentally drives on the wrong side and can't correct, they're forced into a dead faceplant with no recovery besides a double respawn. This feels super bad and can be quite frustrating, so either move the checkpoint forward to give the player time to react, or restrict the driving space before the checkpoint. If you look at all the tips I've mentioned, there's a common idea. Checkpoints went from primarily cut prevention to mistake recovery. They're still incredibly important to make sure the player is taking the intended route, but now they're also expected to be places the player can either recover from or practice with. So if you're unsure about something, it's best to lean on the side of being friendly to the player. I'm not sure if anyone is going to complain that a map was too helpful. Before I wrap things up, there's one more thing I want to cover. Double respawns, or more specifically, custom double respawns. Once again, sorry console players, but this is PC only. I'll cover how to do them in a moment, but before that I want to talk about placement, as I see a lot of players mess this up. There's really only two reasons a double respawn is used. The first one is because of a cut on a full speed map, but that's a given. We'll skip that one. And the second is because a player is looking to recover during live rounds. I'll use the context of Cup of the Day since that's the most popular, but any live rounds competition will do. During Cup of the Day qualifier, I don't know how many people who test every double respawn. Most players just take them as they need them and will most likely only take it once. So make it actually useful. I see too many double respawns where the player is placed in a super blind spot and they have half a second to figure out where they're at before they hit a wall and have to try again. It's already super disorienting to have to figure out where the checkpoint placed you, especially if the scenery is blocking your view of the map. It'll take a bit more work, but make sure to place the double respawn so the player can see familiar spots, or heavily guide them back to the regular route. If you're placing a custom respawn so the player can continue the route, such as right before a speed check, make sure there's a bit of wiggle room for the player to panic for a moment and still make it. It's also not good to force the player to piece together where they're at in a moment's notice and then force them to execute a jump perfectly in order to continue. It just adds to the frustration, and it'll most likely be an automatic elimination from whatever tournament. Please don't give the player more speed than what they would normally have, but maybe a bit more than the bare minimum. Remember my rule about being friendly to the player? That applies here as well, so take that extra time and make sure you have friendly custom respawns. I mentioned that regular checkpoints are the only ones that the player can adjust the double respawn on, and that's correct, but not the whole story. If you've played enough, you probably remember a map or two that featured a custom double respawn on gate and ring checkpoints. I promise I didn't lie. You can't do this. They will find you. But if this isn't a custom double respawn, what is it? Well, it is, but not from the ring or gate checkpoint. Remember those custom checkpoints I mentioned earlier and linked in the description? This is a huge use for them. Basically, instead of collecting the ring checkpoint, the custom checkpoint is placed right before, so the player collects that instead. Since you can change the double respawn of the custom item, you adjust that, which will give you the illusion of collecting the ring checkpoint. But in reality, you actually got the custom one. To finish the trick, you have to link the two together so the ring doesn't override the custom. Obviously, this works for gate checkpoints and regular checkpoints as well, but you may ask why you want to do this for regular checkpoints. But it's almost mandatory. You can get away with adjusting the respawn of one, maybe two regular checkpoints, but any more than that and you might not be able to upload your map to map review. There's a limit of 6 megabytes for each map, and if your map is over that, you can't upload it to a multiplayer room. Spamming a map with custom items is a great way of getting over that limit, but the absolute fastest way is changing the double respawn of regular checkpoints. I assume it's because these checkpoints have a lot of faces on them, and if you change anything about the block, it's technically a custom item, meaning the game has to download them in order for other people to play it. This gets over that limit very quickly. If you're only putting in 1 or 2 custom respawns and aren't going all out on scenery, you can change the base checkpoint. However, the custom checkpoint respawn trick is mandatory for pretty much every full speed map and any other that wants those custom respawns. And here's how you do it. All right, so welcome to the map editor. Oh, I need to place that. And right off the bat, we have a map here that I quickly just made, but you'll notice we can't complete it. We can try double respawning, but I haven't put that in yet. So the current plan, in order to finish the map, is we have to somehow get the car to start all the way back here. And then after getting all the boosters off to the side, then the car will be able to complete the map. So with this checkpoint, we have to set up a double respawn. And as I said before, you could just edit this block, but there are some pretty severe downsides to that. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to go over to my custom item folder, and it's a little messy, don't judge. And I'm going to go ahead and select a stripe checkpoint right there. And I'm going to select the free item mode. That way, I'm going to get this lined up, and then I'm going to place it directly underneath, right under that checkpoint. So underneath the checkpoint here, if we can go down a little bit, we have the line checkpoint right there. And now that we have that, I'm going to go ahead and hit the arrow for modes for item, and I'm going to select edit selected item. So I'm going to click that, and I have to go back underneath the road. I'm going to hit that. And that takes us into the mesh modeler. And there's a few things we're going to want to do here, and they all take place under the geometry tab with mesh. We're going to go ahead and click the little gear wrench icon. Then you're going to see this screen, and this is basically the stripe item. We've got the hitbox, we have the actual texture itself. And what I'm going to do first is probably let's fix that hitbox. So right now the hitbox is this screen, basically this whole rectangle right here. And you can leave it like this, but if they're, especially in longer maps and stuff, I try not to risk cars being able to fly over, hit the side of a checkpoint, and still be able to get it. So to avoid that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and you can basically just click on each one of the faces. If it's not working, try double clicking at first. And then on this phase, so you click it to select it. It's highlighted yellow now. And we're going to push that in like that. And we're going to do the same thing on this side. So click, drag it in, click. Oh, not the whole thing. There we go. Now down. It is, sometimes it is a little finicky. So just be a little patient with it. And I'm just going to make that inside of the checkpoint as such. And I'm going to use this icon on the left to bring the layers back out. And I'm going to edit the checkpoint time now. And checkpoint time, depending on which item set you use, these could be labeled differently, but they should all be relatively similar. And I don't want this little bit of the line checkpoint hanging out. So I'm going to double click that, select the edge, and we know it's only the edges selected from the yellow box. Press delete, get rid of that. Do that on this side as well. Press delete, just like that. Perfect. And now we don't have anything hanging out. And now spawn position, you guys are not going to believe this. That's where we're going to edit the spawn position. I know, it's crazy. So right now the spawn position is shown by this blue, it's supposed to be an arrow, but the arrowhead is a little hidden right now. So just this blue line right here. It's below the road because the checkpoint itself is below the road. So to get it back above the road, I'm going to edit the Y coordinate. I'm going to make that a 1. Bring that up. And basically, you're going to adjust it by either typing in custom values for the X, Y, or Z coordinates. Horizontal angle is which direction this is facing. So 60 degrees, and now the arrow points off in that direction. So if we were to take the double respawn, the car would point off over in that direction. Vertical angle is like, oh, well, that's 60 degrees. Sometimes the coordinates do kind of go a little backwards. I would expect that to be pointing up, but whatever. And then the roll of the car, well, let's reset these to 0. Like that, and then the roll, basically, instead of starting flat, the car would now basically be on its side. So you can adjust everything about the car. I'm going to put that back to 0 for the custom respawn, but for this, and for honestly 99% of custom respawns you just have to worry about the X, Y, and Z coordinates. So as I mentioned before and also showed with the vertical angle, the coordinate plane, as you probably have it inside your head, is probably going to be backwards for what we have here. Don't ask me why. So what I like to do, just to kind of get my bearings, is replace each one with 0. Perfect. Okay, so with 0, it was at 16, now it's 0, so we're heading in the right direction. So now I'm going to go with negative 16, and that should put us, yep, right in the middle of this road. Road platform blocks typically go in increments of 32, so 16, half of 32, works out well. And Z, I'm going to replace that with 0, see where it goes, and we are, once again, moving in the right direction. So I'm going to put this at, what, negative 50? Oh, that's not enough. So, what about 90? Oh, that is perfect. Okay, so that's exactly where I want the car. And that's basically what I do. I just type in the coordinates, whatever I want, just kind of figure it out. And now that we have the checkpoint exactly as we want it, we trimmed the sides, adjusted the hitbox, got the spawn to where we want it, we can go ahead and save the item. And I have a custom checkpoint folder that I like to stuff all these into. So just checkpoint example, I guess. So we'll save that. And well, we aren't done quite yet. So we got the line checkpoint where we want it, but now we actually have to link those two checkpoints together. Otherwise, they'll fight each other, and we don't want fighting. So just like before, I'm going to click the edit block properties down at the bottom, click the checkpoint, group it, and now I have to go under, so select that checkpoint, get that link. They were both marked as link checkpoint number 1, so this is perfect. And now we should be good to go. So we can't make this jump. Yeah, nowhere near enough speed. But if we take that double respawn, we are back on the boosters. And now we can actually finish the map. And that is how you edit custom respawns with the custom checkpoint items. Custom respawns have a bit more going on than most people expect, but with a bit of extra work, they're well worth it. To give a general recap, each type of checkpoint has its own list of uses, but they all surround the same idea. Place them so the player isn't punished too badly for making a mistake, make sure the double respawn works, and in doubt, help the player out. If you keep these ideas in mind, your checkpoint placement will improve and the players will appreciate it. If you have any more tips, tricks, questions, whatever, leave them down in the comments below. If you like Trackmania mapping, you're in the right spot, as that's pretty much all I do here, and I would appreciate it if you liked the video and subscribed, as it helps the channel out. I also have a secondary channel where I post my Twitch VODs, including viewer map review, community tournaments, and more. So if that sounds interesting, check it out. I think that's all of the self-advertisement out of the way, so there's only one more thing to do. And that's to say thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch my video. I really do appreciate it. But now, if you'll excuse me, I think it's time to get off the struggle bus and triple check the placement of those gate checkpoints. Wait, sorry, the door appears to be jammed. I'll just go out the back. Oh no, that's stuck too. No. What about the emergency exits? Why is everything closed? Someone save me from the struggle bus. I can't leave. Will I be stuck here?